but it's such a good conversation. I'm like, damn, I want to like hear that back. And I remember that. I've heard of Teal Swan, but I don't follow her. But I know she has like a large female audience. So yeah.
So what we've been talking about, affect naming,
Affect labeling. Yeah.
affect labeling, calling the emotion, and helping each other see emotions in one another. And we were just talking about anger is an easier emotion to allow for ourselves in a lot of cases than the despair of total abandonment, right?
Yeah.
And why
Yeah.
is that? So I just was bringing up the work of Teal Swan, which I thought was really brilliant, which is tying exactly to what you're saying now, is that in the wild, if we're angry, we're kind of fierce, and there's a lot of chemistry and anger that pushes people away. Get away from me, don't touch me. And it brings up the bigger self. Abandonment, sadness, despair is kind of like just a resignation. It's a complete giving up response. And that has different biochemistry, and that biochemistry can easily attack and can easily attract an overtaking predator. Or if I'm in absolute fear, says Teal Swan, other predators in the wild can smell fear and they're going to come after me. But if I'm angry and I'm boundaried and protected, I'm less apt to be overtaken by a predator. So the same thing happens in our human expression of self-protection, that to be angry in a lot of ways is safer than to be in a state of despair or to be frozen in terror where I could be overtaken. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's much safer to be angry than to be sad or feel abandoned, because then I'm giving you the space to like take advantage of me almost.
It really comes down to the laws of nature in a great way, right? In the survival of the creatures in nature and the type of biochemistry we have and how we survive. So the whole defense system in a human being is designed to protect me from threat to my existential safety and security, meaning my physical self, protect me from that kind of threat, but it's also protecting me from the threat of my sense of self, from someone who invades my dignity, who invades my boundaries, who invades who I think I am, who calls me names that I feel don't belong to me, that insults me. I'm protecting that. I'm protecting the story of who I am. And either kinds of protection is where the defense system comes in to protect me one way or another. And it is all about survival of my physical self in this world. And it's also the survival of my self-identity as well.
That's true. I was actually reading a research paper on affect labeling because there's actually research done on it. And in like before like the conclusion part, the author is like, I don't exactly know why this exactly works. It could be self-reflection. It could be whatever he gave the reasons. But like listening to you, what you just said, do you feel like something, let's say I'm angry, something about you understanding where I'm coming from actually helps the other person feel safer in a way? I mean, how is,
absolutely.
could that be like
So being present to another person's pain. So David Daniels used to say, if you're staring at someone's defense system, you're staring right at their pain. And usually when we have someone who's in front of us, who's defensive, who's angry, who's blame shifting, who's projecting, oftentimes we're not thinking it to ourselves, wow, I'm looking right at their pain. They're angry right now. They're really hurting. They must feel insulted. That's not what we do, right? When somebody's in a defensive or reactive posture, we get kicked in to fight back, right?
Yeah.
But to take David Daniels' stance, and when you see someone in pain, when the defense system shows up, you breathe and you stop and you acknowledge, my goodness, this person's hurting. They might be angry. They might be screaming. They might be yelling insults. They might be saying, you're an asshole. David used to say, if you can just be with that person's pain without personalizing or losing yourself, metaphorically, meaning you going on the defense. But if you stay in your open heart and you look at them and you say, my goodness, You think I'm an asshole. Tell me more. How have I made you feel that you now feel that I'm an asshole? Tell me more, he would say. Now, how much Buddha nature does that require? Takes a lot of presence. It means that my defense system is not triggered, that I'm capable of holding myself present to the pain of another without inducing all of my own defense systems. How dare you call me an asshole? Nobody can call me an asshole. My dignity's been disrespected. I'm having to protect that. If I don't have to protect and I get really curious and I see that the other person is hurting, my goodness, I see that you're really upset, right? This is so affect labeling. My goodness, I see you're really upset and you feel that I'm an asshole. Please tell me how that has happened. Please tell me more about that. Tell me more. And I'll tell you, and I have practiced this, and it's I don't want to say humorous, but it's amazing. All of a sudden, the person's face will soften, and it does relax the reactivity immediately. So exactly what you're saying. The moment I align with their pain and I care about it, all I need to do is care about it. It changes everything.
It's so crazy. So because the guy I was talking about affect labeling, he says, you got the right label when their shoulders relax, their face falls down, and you're like, yeah, I'm really angry, when they like change from that tone, you know that you got the right label, and you just allow them to like speak. And he says, never try to have any I statement, I feel whatever. It's just like, oh, you feel this, let them like.
Yes, let them have their feeling without the defense system having to fight for it. So the moment that, oh my gosh, I see that you're really upset, I really care. That's the key. The key actually is human caring. I really care that you're upset. All of a sudden, the other person's defense system relaxes. And I love that you're describing the difference in the body holding, the difference in the posture, the heart open. And the first thing that I tend to notice is the micro expressions of the face will change. The eyes sometimes will open. When we're in our defensive system, the eyes actually tighten. So the eyes kind of open, and you might even see then a tear, and then they might actually start to speak more. And I have actually witnessed in my own experience that the moment we express care, my gosh, you're really upset. Goodness, tell me more about how you're feeling. It relaxes, and the next thing you know, they're actually offering care back. Oh my gosh, well, it's not that bad. I'm so sorry I called you an asshole. Like that can happen fast too. I've witnessed that. The moment someone feels cared about, it can change everything. Care is anxiolytic, meaning human care relaxes the central nervous system. So when we're holding a baby, a baby screaming and crying, the moment someone picks up the baby and cares about the baby and offers nurturance, the whole central nervous system of the baby will relax. It's anxiolytic. And just as expression of adult care is to another, it's anxiolytic. It actually relaxes the whole central nervous system that's gone into a state of defense. Now,
I think,
does this work with a complete psychopath or a sociopath? Let's qualify that, but I'm going to say to a great extent, yes, it does, because working with Enneagram Prison Project and being in the prison with some high levels of reactivity, and the moment that Susan and I were dealing with some pretty intense situations, the moment we cared about how they felt, we allowed them to express their feeling and we held space for it. I witnessed it also relax people that are at lower levels of development and highly volatile. It also can relax someone who has very little levels of personal presence and very little tolerance for pain. I have seen it work. So I just answered my own question.
No, that's crazy. I think the biggest problem I have with this, right, is that to care for someone else, I feel you need to have like a self-regulatory system first, so that you don't like react to the thing. Because as I was explaining that reptilian mind and the conscious mind, right? I feel when you're in that emotional whirlpool, it's like the conscious mind is off and the reptilian mind is on. And the reptilian mind just cannot process the emotion, which is why it's trying to like react, right?
Yeah.
But to bring that conscious mind online by yourself first and also lending it to like someone else, I think that's where the challenge really is, I feel.
Prem, you're exactly right. That's the work. That's the work. So the work of self-regulation, the work of self-knowing, the ability to regulate emotional upheaval. Now, that all sounds beautiful, and that's what we're all working on, because if I can regulate my own pain, not suppress it, not deny it, not reframe it, but actually be present to experience it with the spaciousness inside of myself that's called self. I stay with self, and I can experience, oh God, that was insulting. Yeah, that really hurt. Well,
Damn.
let's find out more about it. That's self-regulation. It's not suppression. It's not denying. It's not reframing. The ability to do that takes a lot of different capacities. And the first capacity is we've got to heal our own trauma, residual, held on to unprocessed pain that has impacted our own amygdala, the part of our brain that is reflexive, that responds to threat. Now, a child that grows up in a violent household, alcoholic father, is beaten every day, comes home from school terrified, his amygdala is shot. This child, actually, that part of the brain, the fight, flight, freeze part of the brain, high vigilance, high levels of insecurity and fear, that part grows. Actually, if you raise a child in an environment like that, that brain grows, right? So we've got a triune brain. We have a brain stem, we have the emotional brain, and we have the cerebral cortex. We kind of have a triune brain. This is Dan Siegel's work, this little hand, right? So
it's nice, actually.
This threat response part of the brain, called the reptilian brain or the brain stem, that expands. And when that part of the brain expands, these little kids, they have real trouble in school. They can't concentrate. They cannot memorize. So you give these poor little kids a spelling bee and they can't do it. So these kids start to think they're stupid. The teachers are down on them. You're not doing your homework. You know, we need trauma-informed teachers in schools, because you can see this really early on. So this kid grows up with the big amygdala, okay? So fast forward to his adult life. He's married and his wife says, honey, you didn't take out the garbage. Why are you always nagging at me? Boom, the amygdala explodes from a simple question from his wife. However, it induced, you did something wrong. You're a shameful creature. You're an awful man. You're a terrible husband. This is what's happening for him in a split second. And he explodes being asked a question about taking out the garbage. That's what a dysregulated amygdala looks like. He's got an arousal system that goes from 0 to 100 in a split second from an innocuous and simple question from his wife. Maybe her tone of voice wasn't even that bad, but the way he heard it was that someone screaming at him. Now, how do you tell this person to stay present to yourself?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work there. So we have to start with, where is my amygdala? How easily dysregulated do I get from what's happening out here? You know, we have adults in the workforce who the boss says, hey, can you stop by my office later today? I need to go over something with you that I'm not that happy about. Now, depending on your level of unresolved trauma, that statement from your boss can send you into utter chaos or complete lockdown and rigidity, where you're so frozen and you're going into a massive depression really quickly. Or some of the guys I worked with in prison, they wouldn't even show up for that meeting at the end of the day. They would take off and they'd lose their job because they couldn't bear to face conflict or bad feedback or criticism. So what I'm trying to say in all of this is that our amygdalas are not equal. We're all walking around with a different level of unresolved trauma and a fight, flight, or freeze reflex that may or may not ignite at a moment's notice. We start there. What happened to me? There's nothing wrong with me, but what happened to me? And what did it do to my brain? And what am I dealing with now using my type structure? My personality structure is the one holding all this together and trying to deal with everything. And what is our personality structure? What I call the type structure. It's a particular essence-informed temperament, and it's trying to organize solutions for all this every minute of our lives. So in order to now go back to what you said, regulate myself so I can be present to another person like David Daniels. Wow, tell me more. In order to do that, it's really a big deal. It's a beautiful big deal. It's probably the most important thing any of us could ever work on. Spend the time doing, because our relationship to ourself changes. All the biochemistry in my body changes. I can heal all of this rage and cortisol and adrenaline and all of this biochemistry that hurts my physical well-being, actually. So I save myself, and then I also completely change the kinds of relationships I'm having with other people. I can keep my job. I can interact with my boss. I can get feedback. I can care about my wife or my husband when they're upset with me. And I can actually care about them instead of just going on defense and shutting them down.
It's interesting. Man, I think you bring us such an amazing perspective that I don't think many people have. Because I feel it's such like it's a very feminine perspective, I feel. And more in the sense that it's very like caring, encompassing. It kind of like goes to like the more emotional sides of what the problems are. I mean, if you compare to like what usually like guys say, even in like spirituality, it's all like, pa, 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 enlighten, sit, meditate. It's like, they don't actually, do this. But it's interesting because even right there when you're explaining that, you were talking about how you, like labeling yourself in a way like, oh, I'm actually really hurt. I actually feel angry right now. Tell me more. That thing. I actually received a text from someone, and I didn't like the way they responded. And I got really angry, okay? I mean, I stopped texting and then I got really angry. And I thought, okay, perfect time to like, see whether the stuff works or not. Then I'm like, oh, you're really angry. Okay, I try to like go through the 6 levels. You're really angry. Oh, I feel disrespected. And I'm like, yeah, I'm actually feeling really disrespected now, which is why I'm having that reaction. Oh, and I'm also feeling a little bit sad now because, I didn't expect that kind of a response. And I feel a little bit abandoned, because I feel a little bit left out or of the entire circle or something. You know what I mean? I feel more lonely, those kind of emotions started like coming up. And something about in Buddhism, they have this concept called clear seeing, to see something clearly. And something about seeing that sensation or that emotion more clearly just creates that letting go effect, I feel. I mean, even in our previous conversation, I had that kind of moment where, I kind of more clearly saw the situation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I clearly seeing takes a lot of the fear out of it and a lot of the shame out of it. And it's also connecting us to truth. So where there's truth, there's healing. Where there's truth, there's soothing. So when you the following the trailhead, as they often say in psychology, right? So the trailhead is you got an email, and the trailhead is anger. That's what showed up. That's this body of energy that's here right now. And I love how you started to, oh, I'm angry. Wait a minute. Oh, and then you started taking to, well, oh yeah, I'm that was just disrespectful, which is a violation of one's dignity, right? You disrespected me, right? Dignity, autonomy, my free will, my boundaries are all where anger shows up. And then you start taking it down, and you get down to the real core of what all of this is defending, that the anger was defending. Now you're in something very real, which is a real vulnerable place. The vulnerability of self is where all the healing happens. So I love how you took it there. I'll tell you a little story. I was driving on my way. Actually, I was on my way to jail to teach my class.
Yeah.
I just had this ache, this ache in my solar plexus.
Yeah.
My heart was kind of low, and I'm like driving, and I'm like, what is this? So the trailhead is I've got unease in my body. My solar plexus is tight. My heart just feels kind of, and I don't even know what it is. It's like I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I've got to get to prison by 8, right? I'm going over Highway 17. And so I go, okay, I'm going to do my own work on myself. Okay. What's this about? Just, it's like, grip tight right here. And I'm like, oh, that email, I got an email right before I went to sleep. I had forgotten to send my client something. Because I do design work and I do writing. I had forgotten to send them something I'd promised. Okay, I'm a type 1 in the Enneagram. You're always ahead of recrimination. You're always above recrimination. You're always one step ahead so that nobody can find fault in you, right?
Yeah.
I forgot to send something. I violated my own promise. So what's happening to me as I'm driving at 5 o'clock in the morning? All of this, my God, you failed it. You did it wrong. You didn't meet your expectation.
Like
You
really
got no
disappointed.
integrity. So I'm starting to go to shame.
Yeah.
Because my idealized self is you always do what you say you're going to do. You get above recrimination. You don't make mistakes. You get ahead of anybody saying, you forgot something. You get ahead of all that. So I'm like, oh my God, I've got all this shame, and I'm like totally ashamed. And so I get down to, and this shame that I have not met my idealized expectations of self, which means I'm close to who I'm not supposed to be. And what happens when I'm not supposed to be who I'm not supposed to be? I'm going to lose my client. I'm a total loser. I'm not worthy of hiring. I mean, this is how it escalates.
That's like the consequence of the emotion almost. Like the projection of that emotion. Yeah.
It's a protection of ever feeling that kind of shame, which is what drives the personality type, right? So once I realized that, I'm like, oh God, wow, that's a lot of heavy stuff to be feeling over that email. But that email, it started this cascade of who I can't be. And oh my God, once I acknowledged that, I feel so ashamed. And I just went, wow. And then I nurtured it. Yeah. Talking to yourself like that is pretty shaming and scary. Wow. So what happened when I get home from jail tonight? I'm going to send that email with everything that was promised. I'll apologize to the client that I had overstepped it, and I'm going to be okay. Yeah. So, and I'm doing all this when I'm driving, but that's the process of going from this, I just tracked the total tightness in my solar plexus to coming down to what was happening. The same way you said, I'm angry, that showed up, and you were able to identify the anger. All I had for a trailhead was this tightness in my solar plexus that seemed to have no origin. I just seemed to wake up that way. That's really not what happened. That's not what happened. That tightness right there, tightness in solar plexus, had a whole life of its own, and it had a lot to say, and it was holding a lot of shame. So that's how we start undoing this stuff, and we become present to ourselves, we become intimate to ourselves. And all that energy that was locked in here in my solar plexus, I have all that energy. I was about to go teach class with that shame stuck in my heart and right? But freeing that before I got to my class, what happened to all that energy that was bottled up in my solar plexus? It was available as life force to teach my students, to be present to them, to be there with them, to be my better teacher, to be more present to what was going to happen to me, instead of all day walking around like this, like contracted, which is what would have happened if I hadn't traced it back and tuned in like you had to your anger tuned into the pain that was sitting right here in my sternum.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have a very interesting direction I want to take this to. But before that, I just wanted to let you know that when I was actually doing this, it's actually really hard to remember the emotion too. I don't know whether you have it or not. It's just really hard for me to like go, I feel angry. And that thing, oh, okay, the next layer is disrespect. Unless I have like a system that I'm like going through logically, it's really hard to just identify another emotion when you're amidst an emotion. When you're angry, it's very hard to identify, oh, you're also feeling disrespected.
Well, disrespect is not a feeling. Disrespect is the notion that triggers the boundary violation. So anger protects your dignity, your autonomy, your sovereignty, and your boundaries. When anything there is violated, anger is the emotion. Disrespect is not an emotion. Disrespect is something we perceive as happening that we respond to with an emotion. The anger, it fights for your respect, it fights for your dignity. And then when you go under that, it's like the shame, the sadness, that I'm not being seen the way I want to be. Or I've been insulted. There's really sadness and shame there. That disappointment, that's in the heart. Now we're in the heart. And that's the emotions that are felt in the heart. That the anger to protect my boundary, my dignity, my autonomy comes up first. And then we get into the feelings of the heart. And then we can get all the way to, well, and this is at the bottom of all of it, Prem, the very bottom of the pain in the heart. If I'm not all the what I'm supposed to be, if I'm disrespected, if I fail my clients and I get abandoned, I don't belong anymore, I get ostracized from the tribe, I'll die. If I'm not acceptable.
It's very closely related to death.
And every human, all 9 Enneagram types, when you whittle it down, you keep going down, it comes down to, I'm going to be alone, unsupported, ostracized, thrown from the tribe, and I'm going to die. The fear of loneliness, because we cannot make it as a human being alone. Existentially, we know that. Even though in America we're taught to independent in my house and I don't need anybody, that's not true. So the symbol for human being in Japanese and Japan and kanji is one stick leaning on another stick. We don't make it without being able to lean on one another. So that is our existential terror. And so it always, when you whittle it all down, comes down to, I'll be annihilated. I'll be nothing. I'll be thrown away and eaten by lions, and no one will protect me, and no one will care, and there'll be no one to save me, and I can't save myself. It comes down to that. And so just having compassion for the fact that we all share that utter terror of not being acceptable enough to be kept by others, to be kept in the tribe, to belong.
I feel you can only be compassionate towards an emotion that you have personally doesn't affect you. You know what I mean? Like if you're personally not affected by anger, and if your relationship to your own anger and other people's, if your relationship to your own anger is healthy, then I feel it's much easier to be compassionate towards other people's anger.
I would say that's very true. So when my relationship to myself is healthy, whether it's anger, which is frustration, anger, rage, whether it's this sadness and distress, grieving and utter terror of just disappointment and loss, or if it's just anxiety and fear and terror, when I am in good relationship with my 3 big aversive survival systems that scare me to death, fill me with rage, right? Or just the absolute horror and just in hysteria at being abandoned. If I can be present to those systems in myself, I will be able to be more present to them and others. If I absolutely cannot contact that in myself and I'm still living in my defense system, I won't be able to tolerate very much in others. Yeah, I'd say that's a fair statement. Yeah.
So, okay, I have a very interesting direction I want to take it, and then we'll call it, end of the meeting. So, I remember in our first call about when you were talking about Enneagram and in our first recording, you were talking about different Enneagram type and their relationship to different emotions, let's say. And I personally never understood why you were emphasizing certain emotions for certain types much more, but I think now having this conversation, do you feel that different Enneagram types have more unhealthy, or let me put it this way, can be taken over certain emotions more than the other type, which is just in their mechanism itself, which is just ingrained in their defense mechanism itself. Like, as a 7, I could be more triggered with fear, let's say, rather than, let's say, a type 8 who's more taken by anger.
Yeah.
You feel emotion is also like a key component that is one of the key ingredients, you might say, that in a defense system.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just do a little summary here. So what's coming, a lot of the latest research right now with the Enneagram has come through David Daniels, Dr. Dan Siegel, Denise Baker, Denise Daniel, both PhDs, one in temperament, one in genealogy, and Dr. Jack Killen. They have been researching the emotional systems of mammals as tied to humans, and how it actually maps beautifully to the Enneagram system. So the 3 centers of intelligence: mental center of intelligence, emotional center of intelligence, and gut belly center of intelligence, those 3 different centers of intelligence that are well established in the Enneagram, actually maps as well to the work of Jaak Panksepp, who was an affective neuroscientist who came up with 3 aversive, meaning they feel bad, they trigger stress hormones in the body, which is anger, fear, and distress, panic and distress at the loss of connection. There's 3 big systems for survival, and shared by all mammals, shared by all humans, all wolves, all foxes, all mammals have these 3 aversive, meaning big, gripping, don't feel good in your body, call to action systems. And they're also called, Marion Gilbert calls them reflexes, but the fight, flight, freeze reflexes. Now, move to the Enneagram, head center of intelligence. Fear tends to be the dominant survival emotional system that tends to drive more often. The heart center of intelligence in the Enneagram, which is types 2, 3, and 4, they're very sensitive to the panic, distress, grieving, sadness, and just kind of a utter hysteria at the loss of connection, meaning loss of connection, loss of relationship, loss of bonding, loss of attention of other. And then we have the gut and belly center of intelligence, which is very sensitive to boundary violation, autonomy, get out of my way, leave me alone, don't interrupt me, my free will, my boundaries. That's the gut center of intelligence. And anger, rage, and in the more subtle side, agitation, irritation, frustration, that's in the gut center.
Jealousy, maybe.
So you've got 3 big aversive systems: fear, anger, and panic. And they do map to the 3 centers of intelligence in the Enneagram. Now, this is in the book that David and I wrote together, which was the first preview of this kind of neurobiological science and the work of Jaak Panksepp mapped to the Enneagram. And there's another book coming out, I think it's going to be done next year, by Dan Siegel, and it will map continue on the book that David and I wrote on these mammalian systems and how they map to the Enneagram. So the long answer is yes. And certain types are more sensitive to the responsiveness of fear. Some types more anger, and some types of panic. So if you look at 2s, 3s, and 4s, we all have anger, we all have fear, we all have panic, but the 3 centers of intelligence have kind of a dominant, more sensitivity, more highly reactive attunement to these mammalian systems. Does that make sense? Because you're a 7, so fear. So, and a lot of times 7s will say, I don't have any fear. But actually, right, especially if you're a 7-6 wing, you're going to be more aware of your fear, anticipatory, future negative, future positive, and magnification, and oh my God, what if, right?
I don't know why, but it's very hard to recognize it by yourself. Now that you're saying it through you, I can recognize that, oh, there are certain things that I'm actually avoiding because I'm afraid of it.
Yes.
Like, but I'm recognizing it through you. But for me to like process that, I feel, because I have to do it consciously, I feel that part of my mind that can do it automatic, in like an automatic, systematic way, even when I'm not conscious, is just not grown enough. It's not like ingrained enough, you might say.
I tell you, it's so hard to recognize ourselves. And I'm going to lean into this young teacher. His name is John Lukovich. And he's got some really beautiful insights. And, we don't know who we are. And one of the reasons why the Enneagram is so powerful is it really helps us begin to look at who we are. It gives us a map. It puts in front of us, oh, this is how fear shows up. Oh, this is how rage is showing up. Oh, this is how panic and distress and the loss of getting attention shows up. And it's like, oh, I do that. And then it's like, oh, that's who I am. Because we pretty much are walking around as a neurobiological bundle of impulses. We're just surviving. We're surviving the temperament we were given. And then that temperament has to deal with our family of origin and all of the things that happen in our childhood. We're just surviving, adapting, and responding. We're not conscious of it. We're actually asleep to all of these automatic processes that keep us alive, keep us feeling loved, keep us feeling safe, keep us feeling as autonomous as possible. We absolutely cannot, in most cases, see ourselves alone. So this reflective capacity of sharing and identifying and giving each other permission to see these foibles and struggles that we have is really a beautiful gift. That's why I love the Enneagram so much. And as I've heard John Lukovich recently in a podcast, just really sharing how actually the natural state, which this is Gurdjieffian work, our natural state is to be asleep to ourselves. We're just a bundle of impulses and compulsions. And this is what Helen called going on automatic. We're just kind of like a big script, until we go, hey, I just got angry, like you did. Or me going, what is this? What is that? I didn't feel this way yesterday driving me into prison. Why do I feel this way today? So the process of awakening is we need help to see. We really do. Because we're in here, we're trying to look at who we are with the system that protects us from who we are. It's like it goes around in a circle, and the defense system is real tricky. It doesn't
That's
want
why we need help to see who we are. And would it be accurate to say that at least the Enneagram that you are sharing is something that is mapping the emotional data field and then categorizing? It's almost like this. You're mapping the emotional data field of different people. And then you're noticing that this emotional data field that's you're being mapped has like 9 different categories. Would that be accurate?
Well, let's see if I understand what you're saying. So these
like an emotional data field, like fear, anger, and loss of connection, which would say a feeling of abandonment, you might say, a version of that. So you're like kind of like mapping, and the way I kind of like think about it, which you might find it a little silly, in Pokemon, how there are certain Pokemon that's just weak against certain Pokemon, like a fire type is weak against the water type, in games. Like
I don't know that, but it sounds like okay, we got 2 temperaments, right? A fiery temperament and a fluid, flowy temperament. Okay.
Like how water is weak against fire but is strong against, let's say, a grass. You know what I mean? Like grass doesn't
Yes.
affect water that much, but water affects fire. You know how like fire is just weak against water? Like that, how certain types are just weak against, like me, I'm just weak against, if I'm fire, fear is my water, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Where when water
Yeah.
comes, it's just very hard for me to like stay ablaze, if that makes sense.
Well, let's see if I understand what you're saying. We do have each of these 9 personalities. Let's call them temperaments, because that's really what they are.
Yeah,
They're
temperament.
temperamental proclivities to develop in a particular way.
Yeah.
And we've got kind of 9 of them that are over and over in the human species, recognizable all over the world. You go to Japan, the same 9 are there. You can find them. It's kind of amazing. So despite the kind of family systems people have all over the world, we still find these 9 structures for survival.
Yeah.
And so the 9, each one of them has particular gifts and aptitudes, different focus of attention, different sensitivities, and different ways of contributing to the whole of the species in that we survive evolutionarily. So each one of these 9 has contributed a completely different perspective, a different focus of attention, a different dopamine system. 7s get a ton of dopamine from, moving
New
fast,
stuff.
lots of stimulation, new stuff. And then type 5 gets dopamine from studying the same thing for a long time.
Damn.
2 completely different kinds of people. We need them both, right? 7s, can you imagine? They're the great hunters, right? 5s are the great thinkers. They figure out the weather patterns because they study them for 7 months every single day, and they've got something to say about it.
That's so crazy.
Who can do that, right? 7s were like, oh, I can't do that. I need. So the 9 different structures are contributory, and we actually, that circle of the Enneagram, it represents our wholeness as a species.
Yeah.
And as we become more present to ourselves, more response flexible, to where the self occupies the spaciousness inside of me, the defense system does not control my everyday having to defend and fight, and nobody can talk to me like that. When that defense system relaxes, we become more whole, and we actually have more gifts available. We have more life force energy available to us. We can stay present to someone else's upset. We can spend more time in creative process because we're not sitting here with a tight solar plexus that's got us full of shame and we're not aware of it. And all we want to do is go to sleep,
Yeah.
So.
No, that is really insightful. Just to like conclude this meet, we'll have like another call. I think one of the major things that I'm understanding, at least from my experience understanding my Enneagram type, I'm becoming aware of 2 things, at least now. But I still feel I'm missing something that I'm not seeing yet, which is that I'm becoming aware of my emotional structure. Okay, that's one. Which is all the, fear part, how my relationship with fear is, and other emotions like loneliness, abandonment is, stuff like that. And the second part I'm becoming aware of is my preferences or biases that I just naturally have.
Yeah.
Which is then leading to certain like skills, which is like, oh, because I just prefer certain things, just because I prefer new information or hard to get information, I would naturally get a dopamine hit. And that preference is coming from dopamine being hit from different aspects of reality. And each type is not getting the same dopamine. Different types are getting dopamine hit from different activities. That is really the crux of.
Right. The reward system in the brain, the nucleus accumbens in the brain, is wired up with particular forms of stimulation and ways of focusing attention that drive us toward our gift. It feels good to follow it. It's already there. You call it, it's naturally the way you are. You're absolutely right. That is yours, your gift, finding knowledge that's hard to get. Woo. Yeah. Right. Finding the secret treasure buried over there. I would not be surprised if treasure hunters are 7s, right?
I'll tell you something funny. I recently ordered a Japanese instrument called shakuhachi. I don't know whether you know it or not. It's the one that the monks play. And out of all the
Yes.
flutes, you know why I like shakuhachi? Because learning it is very hard. First of all, it's very niche. Not many people play it. And information is hard to get, but you can get it. You know, there are like Japanese books available, so I can then translate it using my phone and then kind of figure it
I
out.
love it. Look at you.
And that's the only
You're the
reason I like.
seeker, discoverer. Ooh, I'm gonna get
Yeah,
into this. Oh, I love it. I love it. I
that's
have
why
a
I
lot of
like.
sevens, so I can relate to you.
Yeah, that's why I like very niche instruments, because I feel like I can figure it out.
And you can
And
figure it out.
and I have information that not many people have, so it's like something like that. So
Yeah, and that makes you special. And there's your foreign
yeah,
heart. And I want to add to, when you talk about I'm getting in touch with my emotions, I want to add for a type 7 to get
yeah,
in touch with the harder emotions. Sevens are very in touch with their joy and
yeah,
stimulation and excitation and fun and happiness. You're real in touch with all that. But for sevens to allow themselves to go, oh my God, I'm terrified of abandonment.
yeah. That's
Oh, I'm sad. Oh, I do feel to let yourself
yeah.
experience those is really broadening for a type 7 Prem.
Yeah, it's like I think the complexity, at least for me, comes in, let's say I'm angry, right? For me to see then I'm disrespectful is to see, like, let's say I'm having this experience, is to suddenly spot this UFO that's invisible. That's what it feels like to me. It's like I swear to God, I cannot perceive it unless someone goes, oh look, there's a UFO, and then I look in that specific direction and then I see the UFO. Yeah, and even if
Yeah.
it's there, I just don't notice it. It's like, where,
Yeah.
That's,
And 7, you guys, it's a gift. It
yeah,
always starts with a wired in gift to reframe anything negative into something positive. There's a great system of denial, and there's also a system of repression in 7, where the negative emotion, whoop, that's not there.
yeah,
That didn't happen. I'm fine. I'm fine. No, sad. I'm never sad. So
yeah,
allowing yourself to call it and name it and not be afraid of it. Sevens are so afraid. If I feel sad, I'll be sad forever. I'll never get out of it. I've got to flight out of it. I've got to move away from it.
bye-bye.
Yeah. Or pretend it never even happened. And that's why sevens, when they're very unaware in relationships and they have a partner that says, you really upset me. And it's like, oh God, here we go again. That was yesterday. Can't you just be with today? Come on, let's go have a picnic. It's like denial,
Yeah,
right? Dismissal, minimize, because sevens are masters and not allowing themselves to feel anything negative because of the fear
yeah,
it'll never end. How do I get out of it? It's like, you know how you picture those little mosquitoes and they land on that sticky paper? That's like,
yeah, exactly.
if I land on sadness, my feet are going to get stuck there and I'm never going to get off. Right?
Yeah, and
So,
you don't even see a way out. I think that is the
that's right. You
real
see
problem.
no way out. Yeah. And the darkness just goes, right? You
Yeah,
just, yeah, you can't go
I
there.
really, yeah, just to like end on this, I really like the Dante's Inferno analogy. How to like to escape hell, you kind of have to like go into it,
Through it. Yeah.
through it,
Yeah, that's right. That's
That's
right.
what it feels like. Yeah.
They're experiencing it while holding the self
Yeah.
compassionately. I hold my own dignity. I hold my connection to all things. I hold
Yeah.
my sense of safety with me. And it's amazing that we can hold a lot when we build up enough capacity to stay with me, meaning the spaciousness inside me is filled with me. I'm right
Yeah.
here with me, right? Yeah.
Okay. And in that note, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Your perspective is really, I feel it's just missing in this sphere. I feel it's really unique, it's really compassionate, and I feel it's really hard to get because I feel it's such a male dominated sphere. You know what I mean? There are very few female people that are actually into these kind of stuff, the self growth. I mean, all right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Prem. Love being with you as
Yeah.
usual. Thank you.